Good evening, good evening. Welcome back to another JAOM Bible Study Live. Jesus is the Answer Outreach Ministry. We're again excited as always to jump into not just the study of the Word, but the transformation of the Word. We've been going through the book of John, just kind of meditating on God's word and getting the message that he wants, not just for us in this moment, but the message that he wants for us to transform our lives and the lives of others. So as we get started tonight, and I see that a couple of people have already popped onto Zoom, and we're looking for people to pop onto social media. But as we get ready to start tonight, Sister Slaughter, if you could you start us off in a word of prayer?
Father God, we just thank you so much for just keeping us, Lord, and bringing us back together as we continue to learn of you.
Amen, amen. Thank you, Latasha, for praying for us to get started. So as we know, we have been in the book of John, and we have been having some exciting times. I think our last couple of Bible studies have been really interesting and good as we've been focusing in on John chapter 6, and we've been in this passage, verse 15 through 25, for a couple of days now, and it has proved to be really, really rich, not just in terms of content, but in terms of the takeaway, the practicality of it for our own lives. So that's been really good, really good. So to get started tonight, we want to, of course, kind of review just a little bit, especially for those people who may be joining us online who have not had the opportunity to be a part of this Bible study with us. So we're in John chapter 6, and we are at verse 15 through 25. And just to kind of reiterate, I want to read for us that passage, and then I want for you guys to get your thinking caps on and kind of your review caps on, because I'm going to be asking some questions about what we've been talking about so far. And so John chapter 6, verse 15 through 25 goes like this. So Jesus, perceiving that they were intending to come and take him by force to make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. Now when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, and after getting into a boat, they started to cross the sea to Capernaum. It had already become dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea began to be stirred up because a strong wind was blowing. Then when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near to the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." So they were willing to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. The next day, the crowd that stood on the other side of the sea saw that there was no other small boat there, except one, and that Jesus had not entered with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples had gone away alone. There came other small boats from Tiberias near to the place where they ate the bread after the Lord had given thanks. So when the crowd saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they themselves got into the small boats and came to Capernaum seeking Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" John chapter 6, 15 through 25. So my question to us here on Zoom, and if we've got anybody who's joining us online, I see that 2 people are already there. Hey, Jennifer. And so I want to ask you, give me a brief recap. What have we been talking about in John chapter 6, verse 15 through 25? Anybody can go.
Started off with motive. They wanted to force him to be king. Did they really want him to be their king? What was their motive? And Jesus was not distracted by that.
That is exactly where we started. They wanted to take him by force to be king. And we talked a lot about what motive they had for that. What were the driving factors? And to expand on that, we also talked about the fact that Jesus came for a different purpose than what they had in mind. And that sometimes when Jesus has to withdraw himself, it's for our own good. Maybe what I want from him is not what I need and not what I really need from him. And so sometimes he steps away, but not to leave us, but to fulfill his purpose. All right, great start off to that, Pastor Taylor. So who else? What have we been talking about so far in John chapter 6, verse 15 through 25? I see that Sophia and Brian just came on. Go ahead, Latasha. I see you're unmuted.
I remember we talked about when they were willing to let him in. We have to be willing.
Yes.
Because he doesn't force his way in.
Yes, yes. He does not force his way in at all, and we have to be willing. And for those of you who are following along online, Latasha is alluding to verse 21, which is the last place that we talked about, where it says, so they were willing to receive him into the boat, and immediately they were where they were going. And so we talked a lot about our will, our desire, not that God is ever not wanting to come to us, but that our side of it is that we have got to be willing to receive him. Pastor Taylor, I see that you're unmuted. You want to jump back in?
I think you did a masterful job in saying when they saw Jesus, nothing changed. The storm was still there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in our own lives, when we see Jesus, it does not mean that our situation changes, but our perspective has to change because Jesus is there.
Yes, yes. Just the knowledge that he was there was enough for them to not be afraid. Absolutely, absolutely. And just the same way for us. Because like we've been saying, our study here is not about getting knowledge or knowing the stories of the Bible any more than we already know them. It's about how do we apply these to our lives? How does it transform us? So yes, absolutely. Having that experience with God that we know that we don't have to worry about anything because he is in the storm with us. Thank you for that reminder, Pastor Taylor, of where we've been. Anybody else? What else have we been talking about? Anything else that stood out for you?
Talked about relationship. First important to know God, because they have to recognize him in the first place, in order to invite him on to go.
Yes, absolutely. I remember that one came up at the end of Sunday night. Brian slid it in last Sunday night, slid it in right at the end, talking about how he said, it is I. He didn't even have to read, he didn't even have to self-identify. He didn't have to shout over the waves and say, hey, it's me, Jesus. All he had to say, it is I. And because they had a relationship with him, Anarchy, they knew his voice. And because of that relationship and what they knew to expect, and not that we're getting caught up in outcomes, but that relationship taught them that they could be comforted by his very presence. Yes, yes. All right, some good reminders. I like how we're talking, guys. All right, does anything else pop out as we're going through this kind of review? What else did we talk about going through John chapter 6, verse 15 through 25? What else stood out for you guys? All right, so I think we've covered a lot of the main points that we've been going through. For those of you who are online, we started at verse 15 here and we focused in through verse 21. And so we're going to see where this is going to take us next tonight. One of the things, of course, in the study of John that we always have to remember, and I always pick on Gwen for this one because she always answers it, and I love it, is the whole purpose of John is what? Gwen, take it away.
Believing in Jesus Christ, our Savior.
Yeah, that's it. That is it. That is a foundation for any of these stories, experiences, all of this stuff. That's the foundation of it all. If there was not belief in Jesus, there could be no relationship. If there was not belief in Jesus, there could be no willingness. If there was not belief in Jesus, none of what is happening here would have served any kind of purpose. And so, as we're going through the study of John, not just this chapter, but all of them, we want to undergird that with the idea that this book is about believing in Jesus. So let's bring it up to speed to where we are tonight. The last point, the very last point we left off on in verse 21 is where we said they were willing to receive him, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. And the last point that we made on that was this idea that as soon as we are willing to receive God, immediately we are where we need to be. And Anake made that point, I think, really beautifully the last time, where once we've got Jesus, once we are, let me put that a different way, because he's never gone. Once we receive him, which is the way the text puts it, then we are transported to where we need to be. And that where we need to be doesn't necessarily have to align with what my ideas about where I need to be are. But where I need to be is always going to be based on God and Christ looking out for our very, very best. And so in this scenario here, in this case, immediately the disciples and everybody else, they were at the land to which they were going. So that immediately might look differently for us in our lives as we're going through our own storm. But the encouragement here that we left off with the last time was that as long as we receive Jesus, no matter what our challenge is, no matter what storm we're facing, no matter how dark it might be, that once we open ourselves up to him, he immediately takes us to what we need. Pastor Taylor, I see that you're unmuted. Jump on it.
Two quick things. One, keep your eyes on StreamYard, because I know Jennifer must be saying something.
I'm keeping my eye there.
Okay. This idea that you just proposed, that we need to be where Jesus is, immediately popped into my mind was Mary and her sister, and one was in the kitchen getting everything ready, and came out and complained to Jesus. I'm working my tail off, and Jesus sitting here at your feet. And Jesus' response was, your sister chose the better place. My presence is where you need to be.
Yeah.
It's my presence. It's the comforting. Our comfort, as you said, does not come from the fact that once they were in his presence, immediately when he got on board, when they received him, the boat went to dry land. That's not the shout. The shout is his presence is dry land. His presence is healing. His presence is restoration. Whether we are experiencing it then or not, his presence. And something we've always said is believe God and then see miracles.
Now, I'm willing to bet, just kind of leading off of that point that you made, is that you made mention of the fact that you may not be on land. And I thought to myself, but if I'm in connection with God, if I have received him, then my perspective, my way of thinking, how I feel about being in this storm or not being in this storm is going to be consistent. Because I'm consistently with him. I'm consistently receiving him. I'm consistently in connection with him. And so that's kind of where my mind goes. All right.
So I am on trial, whether or not it's physical or not. My presence with him is the trial. Yes, I agree.
Yes. And so that should really keep us no matter what our situation is, whether we're on the mountaintop, whether we're in the valley, whether we're on the sea or on dry land. That feeling of peace and comfort and safety and stability and assurance, all of that is still within him. All right, so let's see where John takes us next. And so in verse 22, they take us to the very next day. And it says that the crowd that stood on the other side of the sea, that saw that there was no other small boat there except one, and that Jesus had not entered with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples had gone away alone. And so it kind of goes on to kind of paint this picture of the very people who were kind of impacted by Jesus and the disciples and the experience from the time before they left. They're now standing on the shore going, but we saw the disciples go on a boat, but we didn't see Jesus go on the boat. So what happened here? So you guys, tell me what you think. What do you think is going on in this scene here? And I'm going to read it one more time here. I'm going to read 22 through 25, because I think a lot of what we'll talk about, we may not get through all of it, but a lot of what we'll talk about is in this portion of it. So I'm going to read it again while you're thinking. You guys kind of just think about what's happening in their minds, what's the kind of picture that's being painted here, and maybe just kind of put yourselves in the story. So the next day, the crowd that stood on the other side of the sea saw that there was no other small boat there except one, and that Jesus had not entered with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples had gone away alone. There came other small boats from Tiberias near to the place where they ate the bread after the Lord had given thanks. So when the crowd saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they themselves got into the small boats and came to Capernaum seeking Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" All right, tell me your thoughts. What is going on here? You're on the shore of the sea. You've been going through this experience from the time that he broke the bread and fed 5,000 men and women and children and all of this stuff. And now he withdrew and now we're here. Tell me what's going through your minds.
Come on, ask a question again another way.
Okay. So what I kind of want for you guys to do is kind of paint a picture to us here of what do you think it's like to be in this crowd, wondering where Jesus is and what your mindset is after he has fed everybody, after you wanted to make him king. Like, what is the mindset? What's your mindset standing in this crowd here and now? More. Okay, Brian, you can't just say more and leave it there to tell us what you're thinking.
Oh, he said a lot there.
That's it more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, if you think about it logically, right? Mm-hmm. Timeline wise, if I'm in this crowd, and obviously it's more than 5,000, right? Mm-hmm. This huge crowd. First of all, did I even actually see Jesus? From a closer distance. A close distance, or was I at the back? I heard him, right, clearly, but I wanted to be closer. So now I'm looking for a new opportunity to get closer, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to be more involved. I want him to look at me and touch me. So now that everybody's settled, belly full, nice little nap. Mm-hmm. So it's. You can almost liken it to like how people chase celebrities, right? Mm-hmm. I know that I'm almost certain I saw him and her. They left the restaurant and they got into this car and they headed in that direction. Where they go next? Because I want to be there next. Mm-hmm. for the next thing. Mm-hmm. So I think the first line is kind of painting a nice perspective of, Jesus did this great thing
Mm-hmm.
to his disciples, but the people on the shore are affirming that great miracle that they never really witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's where my mind is starting to go.
All right. I like it. So now let's put that in some context, in some more context. You've already painted a really good picture, Brian. So when we first started talking in verse 15, we talked about motive and what the people were looking for when they were like, oh no, we've got to make this guy king. First of all, we just witnessed him have this miraculous thing happen, right? Where we know that if this is our king, our whatever food shortage problems we have ever had, that will never be the case again. And if he can do that, how does that set us up in terms of how powerful our kingdom would be? Think about this in terms of war. We've got a king who can replenish our soldiers, heal them, do all of these things. And so, Brian, when you said more, my mind goes back to that context and all of that energy that went behind, we want to make you king. And like you said, they didn't see that extra miracle out on the water of Jesus walking out to the boat and going assuring his disciples. They didn't experience that, but they knew what they had experienced before this. And like you said, like somebody chasing a celebrity, wanting more of that experience, that's exactly the position that they were in. And so the question comes to mind for me. Is this the same kind of more that we want to experience when we want more of Jesus? Or is there something different that we want?
Generally, it's both. Probably.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the man part of us, the human part of us, you know, flesh, we're always going to want that, you know, Lord, if you just get me through this, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, things work out for us. And, you know, we want more without really trying to connect to the source of that more. We just look for the result.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're trying to attach ourselves to the result instead of, you know, the solver of all problems, the power source itself.
I like the way you're talking about this. I think you're absolutely right. That we tend to approach this from those two different aspects. And we've been talking a lot in John. Pastor Taylor has said this thousands of times at this point about how important it is for us, and especially as we're talking about in the context of John, believing in Jesus, not for stuff, but just believing in him. Because there's a challenge with just believing in Jesus for stuff. And just believing in Jesus, I'll put it a different way, believing in Jesus with certain expectations. What do you guys think the challenge is with believing in Jesus just for certain expectations?
Well, no, go ahead.
All of a sudden, you're still empty, wanting to be filled even more when you don't have that connection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. That's one way.
I think what Latasha said is dead on.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff can't, miracles. One of the things I'm thinking of is the parable Jesus gave of the man that was in hell and said, hey, please just let me go back and talk to my sons. And if I could just go back and talk to my sons and just tell him, listen, you don't want to go to this place. And Jesus' response was, if they can't believe Moses, it doesn't matter how much miracles get worked. It doesn't matter how much signs they see. It doesn't matter how much any of that, because this is not how it was designed. It wasn't designed that the emptiness we have, Latasha, be filled by signs and miracles. And if we were just back in those days, and if we were just blah 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 blah. What Latasha said, what Brian said, we're forever going to be wanting more. We're forever going to be wanting more. And so that's the craziness of believing for stuff or believing because I experienced stuff. Throughout the Gospel of John, you'll hear Jesus say to the disciples, "Do you now believe? Do you now believe? Do you now believe? Do you now believe?" And when rubber met the road, we realized they didn't believe. They all ran away and left.
And so to add on to that, the other piece that I was thinking about is what we've seen so far is that even when Jesus shows up, so to speak, he doesn't always show up in the way that we expect him to. And so if we get caught up in an expectation or a certain outcome in terms of what is supposed to happen, then we are likely going to set ourselves up for disappointment. Because I am 100% certain, and of course I'm taking some literary license here, but I am 100% certain that those disciples did not expect Jesus to come walking on no water in the middle of this wind and rain and waves crashing. I'm 100% certain they didn't expect that. I am 100% certain that as they sat down with those people in that crowd of 5,000 men plus women and children, I am 100% certain they did not expect him to take those 5 loaves and 2 fishes and feed everybody. Certain of that. I am 100% certain that those people who came with the intention to make him king did not expect him to bounce. They expected to be carrying him on their shoulders and declaring him king. But he doesn't show up in the way that we anticipate. And so we have to just believe him and trust that what he's saying. I see that you're unmuted, Brian, and see that what he does, that part of it is out of our control. All we have to do is just, you want to call it blind faith? Yes, but that's the best way to do it. Go ahead, Brian.
It's belief.
Go ahead.
So I think a lot of times we're expecting God to show up in how we want, but we need to always keep in mind that God does things for his glory and not for ours. And if we remember that it is for his glory, then our expectations will be different. And remember, we have to remember that faith is what we can't see. And it is that's what faith is, believing in something, believing that no matter what the outcome is, how it happens, it's for your own good, and it is how God wants to glorify his name.
Listen.
Not about us.
Listen.
If it's not going to glorify his name, then we're not going to have he's not going to do something just because. It is always to glorify his name. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on that.
Veline, that 2 cents is about 10 and a half. That is a great, great point. It is for his glory at the end of the day. It is about, and I think sometimes when we say it's for God's glory, somebody who may be listening, who may, go, well, so God just wants to bring all of the attention to him. But anything that's for God's glory is ultimately for our good. And so it's a good thing that God does things for his glory, because it doesn't just impact me, the individual, who gets the blessing or the miracle or any of those things. When God does it for his glory, then it's a way for others to also experience that and be pulled into that and get that connection with him as well. So even though it's for his glory, it's still for all of our benefit.
Let me say, because and I think you did a good job in talking about that glory piece. Can we look at that? Can we expand that a little bit more?
Sure.
For the very point that you say, many people, including me, at some point in my life, I've wondered, all for God's glory. But I think what happened is our definitions got screwed up. So when we think for God's glory, let's go back to Brian's analogy of the Hollywood artist, who when they show up, we go crazy for their glory, and they do it for their glory. But the definition for God's glory is not the same as that. It's not God. It's not the emotional excitement that we God's glory is love.
Mm-hmm. Plain and
Yes.
simple.
So whatever we do should be out of love to God. How is this showing love to God? And the process of loving God is receiving God's love, loving ourselves, loving others, and it bounces to God.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But we also have to remember that in all of this, we have to take self out of it. We have to deny self. If we don't deny self, we can't see anything that God is doing, because it is always going to be about me.
Yes.
And that is the problem from the beginning of time. It's not knowing how to deny self.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And Kamala, if you allow me,
Go ahead.
not just denying self. Because again, you said it, we're going to get the benefit. So it's not just denying self, it's the lustfulness. It's the not knowing what's best for us.
It's the immediate gratification. Yes.
It's what feels good in this moment.
Yes.
Yep.
Because we're going to receive benefit anyway.
Let me ask you a question, right? What then, and this is going to go in line with what you said, but I just feel to be a bit of a troublemaker. What then is belief in Jesus? Because, and this is going to go right back to you guys' point, right? Just look at it at the surface of that person. So, well, I believe Jesus is the Son of God. And, the average person on the road will say that. But guess what? The devil also believes that. Because if he didn't believe that, then what was the point?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? So it comes back to, our willingness and love and the motivation.
Yes.
Right? What's really motivating us? Is it for us to be with God, or is it for us to reap the benefits of being close to God?
Brian, that is an excellent. Go ahead, Pastor Taylor. Go ahead.
Come on.
No, I was just going to say that's an excellent point to make. And actually, I think that is where we need to take the conversation next time, because here's why. So we've kind of looked at what the challenge is when the motivation for why we're seeking Jesus is off kilter. So the question for us now, when our motivation for seeking Jesus is on the right track, isn't this the very same way we should be seeking him? Think about what the people did here. When they were like, oh, where is he? We're going to find where he is. No matter what part of this country is in, no matter if he's on sea, on land, no matter what I have to do to get to him, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And so that motivation change is crucial to us.
Yeah. We live in time, right? So I would say, life is made up of Job experiences, right? We have this time where everything is good, and then we have this time where everything is bad. And as you just said, in this moment where everything is bad, my solution is I need to seek Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple, right? But the fork in the road is you have one person to say, I believe in Jesus. I even went to church once or twice, and I'm a Christian, so I should not be poor.
Yeah.
That's right.
Or, I should not be struggling.
Mm-hmm.
Or I shouldn't be sick.
Or I shouldn't be sick, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those are the pivotal moments where, I think Jesus allows certain things to happen to put us in position, right? Even when you think about a game like chess, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might have one guy playing and he feels that he just feels that he's winning without realizing that the other guy is thinking 10 moves ahead, right? And he's putting his pieces in position, right? And you're just falling right in. So it's kind of like that, right? God puts us in a position so that we should actively seek him, right? Just like with the children of Israel, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was never going to let them in the promised land until they were in position
Until they were,
to acknowledge who he was to
yes,
them.
until
And
they
so
were ready
they
to truly
took forever to
receive
figure
him.
it out.
Yep. All right, guys, this has been hot. I'm putting a pin in it here. We're at 9:36. We want to go ahead, Pastor Taylor. I'll give you one last floor.
Just real quick, because I want to cheat a little bit.
All right, cheat a little bit. Go ahead.
The motivation, the action of seeking him, and this is crucial to your next discussion. The action of seeking him from me who have the wrong motive and Brian who has the right motive might look like the very same
Yes. Yes. Pastor Taylor, why would you do that? Why would you do that?
Okay.
Why would you do that? We're gonna fit it here, guys. So now that we know that discussion is hot, let's pick it back up where on Tuesday.
That reminds me of, like when you teach, and you're a teacher, and you have two students, you give this question, and they both have the same answer, right? They both get it right, so to speak. But you hand them the piece of chalk and say, okay, show me the working out on the board. And that's where, stuff can get interesting.
Yes, indeed. So we're going to talk about how that stuff gets interesting on Tuesday when we come back. So for those of you who are online listening on, popping in and out, or if you watch this video after the fact, join us again on Tuesday night right here on this, whatever format you came in on. If you came in on Zoom, that's great. If you came in on social media, that's great. But join us again to pick it up right here in John, where we're going to continue this discussion of what it means to seek Jesus when we have the right motive. What does that look like for us? How can it look the same if I've got the wrong motive, and what makes that difference? I think this has been a great discussion tonight. Pastor Taylor, I'm going to ask you to pray us out to close it out. And if you have anything final that you want to say just at the end of the discussion, we'd love to hear it.
Thank you so much for an amazing, instructive, and transformative discussion. We're grateful. We're back on Tuesday night with our Bible study at 9. Then on Wednesday night, our prayer and praise. And then on Thursday night at 7 o'clock, we'll have our pantry.